All right, so we're going to talk about taking multiplication expressions, putting them into exponential notation, and then evaluating. So we're going to work on exponents. This is our introduction to that. And on exponents, the exponents are those little numbers that you see at the top. Okay, so on this first one, we have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which means our base here is going to be 5, because that's the number that we have on these. Well, since we have 4 of them, it's 5 to the 4th power. Your calculator will help you with this. You can put in 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, or you can put in 5 and then use the caret key, so 5, and then the caret key, and then 4. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you've tried it and you've gotten 625. All right, so now you're going to work this thing out in different ways. So you're going to work forwards and backwards. So the second one give you 4 squared, which means it's 4 times 4. And then 4 squared is going to be 4 times 4, which is 16. Use your calculators if you want. Like this is a shaded in box right here. You're not going to put an answer because when we do h here, the base is h, and then there's 4 of them, so it's h to the 4th, but I don't know what h is, so I cannot continue to compute. So that's where you'd stop. That's why some of these are kind of filled in the way that they are. So that one, and then anything that's got a letter to it. Okay, now let's talk about our exponents and what everything means. So you're going to see some directions that ask you to put it in expanded form. Expanded form is going to be 5 times 5 times 5. So because the larger number is known as my base, okay, it's the base, it's a solid one, it doesn't change. And then the 3 here is known as my exponent. That's the number of times you're going to multiply the base. Okay, and that's why it's called exponents. So we're going to learn different rules about exponents over the next couple of weeks here. Okay, so ways to say this, when it says 5 to the 3rd, it says it's this little guy right here. It's 5 to the 3rd power. Or because it's to the 3rd power, it's 5 raised to the power of 3. Or you can also say 5 cubed. So you have lots of different ways that you can go about this. Okay, and so you'll see the teacher saying it in different ways. You'll see it in different ways, explain different ways. Okay, so now what we want you to do here is we want you just to write it in expanded form, which means you're going to take, and I'm going to ask you to pause as we go through. You're going to take this bottom number, this 5, and I'm going to expand it out. So I'm going to write it out like we did above in this little box. And so since there are 2 of them, it's going to be 5 times 5. And that's expanded form. You're done. You don't have to compute. It did not want you to compute. We're going to continue on with this. Now the next one, again, your base is 2 here, but you're going to write it 5 times. That little number tells you how many 2's to write. So it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, I'd like you to go ahead and pause and do number 3 and 4 and then resume. Okay, so hopefully you've tried these. You've gotten 3 4s because there's the 3 here. This one, there's 4 x's, so when you write it out like this, you just write 4 x's next to each other. You can put dots between. I would not recommend putting an x between them because that could get confusing when it comes to your variables. Okay, so now it says we're going to evaluate, which means we're going to take it one step further and find an answer to the problem. So 5 times 5 is 25, and I want you to do that, pause, and try that for 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now that you've tried that, 2 to the 5th power is not 10. Be careful because you're doing 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. You can do 2 with the caret key and then 5. So you should have gotten 32. 4 to the 3rd power, 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. And then x to the 4th power is just x to the 4th. We cannot evaluate it any more than that because it is a variable. Okay, so now let's talk about when there's negatives involved, because there are rules with this. Let's talk about if you put it in your calculator, just like you see here. So I want you to try that. -7 squared. You hit enter. You should get -49. Okay, now I want you to try the second one. Use parentheses this time, so left parentheses. Feel free to pause if you want to do it before. -7 parentheses, now square it. Hit enter. When you do that, you get 49. So we got 49 for both. This one, if you're not specific with your calculator, it does not give you the right answer. This is not squaring the negative. So a negative out front stays negative. This one, a negative times a negative makes a positive since we have 2, okay? That's why it became a positive 49. And your calculator only knows what you tell it to do, so you must have the parentheses if they're needed. So you're gonna try these ones at the bottom. I want you to put them in just as you see them into your calculator, and I want you to get an answer. So please pause here and try it. Okay, so now you got -25, a positive 25, -64, -64. So what's happened here is the negative out front just stays negative. That's what happens. But for the number 4, it's -4 times -4 times -4. So if we look at just the negatives, negative times negative makes it positive. Positive times negative makes it negative. So when you have an odd number with a negative, it's going to stay negative. Okay, so that's our basics on our intro to our exponents. You have a practice page here that you are going to work through. It says rewrite the numbers as multiplication problems. So what they want you to do on this one, and you can do it next to it or over here in the answers, it's going to be 9 times 9. They want you to write it as a multiplication problem. Okay, so this one says rewrite the multiplication problem as exponential notation, which means I'm going to take my base of 4, this is number 6, and then I'm going to count them. I got 1, 2, 3, so it's 4 to the third power. So you're going to have an exponent in there. That's where the exponential notation comes in. Okay, so now these actually do say solve the problem, so they want you to actually go through and plug these into your calculator. So you're going to put 7 squared in your calculator, and then you're going to put your answer here. I think you can do those. You have to know what cubed means, okay? I think you already do. We've talked about this many times. So use those. I'd like you to write these out. So 7 cubed would be 7 to the third power. And then you're going to put it in your calculator and your answer will go over here. I'd like your answers listed on the right. It's going to make that easier for you to check your answers on the next day that you're with me.